correct, sir?
Yes, sir.
You stated you're correct.
I'm McKinley Downs Coffin Jr.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What is your present position with Volusia County?
I'm the Chief Deputy for the Volusia County Sheriff's Office.
And prior to becoming Chief Deputy, what was your position with Volusia County?
I was the Director of Public Protection.
Were you the Director of Public Protection during the time frame of June through the end of 2010?
Yes, ma'am.
I want to direct your attention to the disciplinary letter that you prepared or that you authored on regarding then Captain Roy Rollins. How did you become aware of the incident that occurred with Captain Rollins?
It was brought to my attention by then Chief of Fire Services, Pozo.
And what did Chief Posey tell you, if you recall?
Initially, I believe he told me that there was a discrepancy in how some controlled substances were disposed of and accounted for, and requested that we open up an internal affairs investigation.
At that time, were you aware of other issues with the fire services regarding the handling of controlled substances, other cases where this was at issue?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you, in fact, request an internal investigation be done?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, Captain Rollins.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Before we talk about that, I want to go back to, and I believe you testified to this board before about your position on disciplinary action when you became the Director of Public Protection. Can you just tell them what position you took with regards to that?
When I came into the Department of Public Protection in late 2009, I noticed some inconsistencies in the way discipline was being applied across the various divisions within public protection. So in March of 2010, I authored a memo to the division directors explaining exactly how discipline and awards would be done from that point forward. And specifically in terms of non-adverse action, that would be handled at the division director level, and anything of adverse action would be handled at the department level, so that we could gain some consistency in how discipline was applied across the board.
And let's just clarify, please. Adverse action means anything, a suspension or termination, anything that's going to affect someone's pay, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And non-adverse action would be written reprimand, oral counseling, those types of things.
Yes, ma'am.
And when you say that the non-adverse action was to be handled at the division level, in fire services is a division, and then that would have been at that time Chief Pozo?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, I want to ask you now, direct back to the internal investigation of Captain Rollins. At the conclusion of that investigation, were you provided a copy of the investigation and briefed on what had been determined by the investigation?
Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell the board just generally what you found out about what had happened with Captain Rollins?
Basically, what was at issue here was the improper disposal and accountability of controlled substances in fire services. This is a big problem because of the trust that the public places in our staff to make sure that we don't mishandle controlled substances. In this particular case, not only was the substance improperly disposed of in terms of what the standard operating procedures were, the written SOGs, but then Mr. Rollins at the time either directed or implied to the subordinate employees that they needed to falsify documents, which was a huge problem for me.
Okay, and could you, and the board's heard a lot of testimony about the forms, the accountability forms. There may be one sitting up there that the previous witness authored. Is that what you're referring to when you talk about falsification of documents?
Yes, ma'am. And
can you explain why, in your opinion, what happened on June 2nd amounted to, or essentially was, a falsification of those documents?
What these documents basically say is that the controlled substances were wasted in accordance with the SOG. And in this particular case, they were not. Clearly, they were not, even by Mr. Rollins' own admission, they were not. Yet he directed the employees to sign the log as if they had been wasted properly.
I'd like you to refer to your notice of demotion, and the board members have copies of this, and ask you to look at page 2 where you discuss the bottom of page 1, the allegations that were sustained, and if you would please again, they've heard a lot of testimony, so just if you could tell in your own words, what actions of Captain Rollins do you feel were sustained these violations?
In terms of the improper collection, disposal, and documentation of the controlled substances in accordance with the SOG, clearly that the substances were not properly disposed of. They were not injected into a waste container as the SOG requires. They were placed into a bulk biohazard container and sealed and then disposed of at a later date. In terms of the Merit System Section 86-451B, again, the conduct with which Mr. Rollins exhibited in here, it prevents the efficient and effective performance of our department responsibilities because the public entrusts us to these controlled substances in order to be able to handle them, use them, and dispose of them properly. In addition to that, Dr. Springer, as the EMS medical director, has his license on the line with the DEA that in violations that we have like this, the DEA can place Dr. Springer's license in jeopardy. That's a significant problem for us in the county and for Dr. Springer individually. And in terms of the Merit System Rules 86-453 subsection 1, this is a willful neglect of his duties in directing subordinates to falsify law books.
So you provided Captain Rollins with a notice of intent to demote him. Did you subsequently meet with him after that, prior to initiating your final discipline, to hear his side of, let him tell you what he had done and why he had done it? Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am. Chief Pozo and I met with him.
Okay, and do you remember at that time, did he indicate to you anything about having already received discipline for, or corrective action for his actions that day?
We briefly discussed whether or not he had a conversation with Deputy Chief Pasica at the time, but there was no discipline issued prior to my notice to him.
Okay. When you spoke with Captain Rollins, did he indicate to you that he had been in a hurry that day, the day he was collecting was the June 2nd date? Do you remember whether he told you he'd been in a hurry and basically had cut corners?
Yeah, he had gotten a late start that day, and Deputy Chief Weaver had asked him to also escort an inspector around at the time. So he was behind the curve from the beginning of the day, and it just carried him into the latter part of the day, which is normally past his work time of 5 o'clock.
Was he a salaried employee at the time?
Yes, ma'am.
So he could work past 5 o'clock, but he wouldn't make overtime or anything like that? I mean, could he have stayed past 5 to complete this task?
All of us salaried employees do it all the time.
Okay, there was nothing that would have precluded him from doing that?
No, ma'am.
Lieutenant Rollins has also indicated that the wasting could include throwing the full vials of lorazepam into that container. Do you agree with that?
No, ma'am.
What would be your definition of wasting pursuant to that policy that he was charged with violating?
My definition of the wasting would be that the drugs would be squirted into the container and placed in a fashion that they could not be used by anybody at any time in the future.
Do you recall discussion with then Chief Pozo about what level of discipline was appropriate for this for these offenses?
We did have a discussion about that.
And did you consider this to be a terminable offense?
Yes, ma'am.
Why is that?
I believe the mishandling of controlled substances, especially with the history of Volusia County Fire Services, I mean, we had moved to terminate employees prior to this for less than this. It is very serious. But what makes it very egregious to me is that he directed other employees to falsify the law. That, to me, pushed it to the point that I thought that this was a terminable offense.
Ultimately, you decided not to terminate him. What went into your decision on that?
Chief Pozo and I discussed it at length. When you take a look at what Mr. Rollins has done over the period of his career, and the fact that we believe that we're reasonably certain that we accounted for all the controlled substances eventually. Chief Pozo's recommendation was that he be demoted, and I went with Chief Pozo on this.
And is that a one-level demotion from captain to lieutenant?
Yes, ma'am.
I have no further questions.
Roland, any questions?
No, thank you.
Questions from board members? Any reason to hold this witness over?
No, sir.
In that case, we appreciate your time and testimony this morning.